This is the Soft Power Podcast, episode 25. Soft Power Society, thank you for tuning in and subscribing to the show. I'm so happy and grateful for your continued and growing support. And to my new listeners, my name is Susan Callender. I'm a high-performance social skills coach for professionals, entrepreneurs, and business owners. Now, why high performance? Well, I generally don't work with people who just want to squeak by. My clients truly want to be at the top of their game, and they want to be proficient, wholly proficient in the area of human relations, because they realize at the end of the day that it's your people skills that truly pay the bills. Maybe I'll do an episode just about the work that I do in the next few weeks, just pinpointing the areas covered by that big golf-size umbrella term of human relations. For the purposes of today's episode, you just need to know that for the most part, human relations encompass interpersonal skills and how your persona affects the people around you all day, everywhere you go. Now, back on episode number 22, we took a fresh look at Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. On that episode, we did a light dissection, if you will, of part of one of Mr. Carnegie's book, which is on the list of the top 100 nonfiction books of all time, and for good reason. Part one of How to Win Friends and Influence People shares the most basic and fundamental techniques for handling people. That the information written in this book that was first published in 1936 is outdated is completely beside the point. So I really urge you to ignore that if you decide to read the book for the first time after hearing this and subsequent episodes of the Soft Power Podcast where we discuss the writing of Dale Carnegie. What should capture your attention is how relevant the principles are today in comparison to what will soon be a century. Yes, it's coming up on a century since the book was written. To recap, the principles included in part 1 of the book and in episode 22 of this podcast include principle number 1, which is don't criticize, condemn, or complain, which is pretty straightforward. Principle number 2, give honest and sincere appreciation for whatever a person brings to the situation. And principle number 3, arouse in the other person an eager want. I get a lot of questions about that one. It's just that old-timey language. What he's saying, in other words, is search for what motivates a person. What's making your customer buy, or your student learn, or your patient, what's making them follow what you prescribe, or your employee, what's making them follow your leadership. It's not going to be the same thing that motivates you. So by arousing that eager want, you want to motivate others in a way that causes them to motivate themselves. It's not about you and what you want. It's about them and what they need to drive them, to get them to that next point. Now, I understand that there are many listeners who are just hearing the name Dale Carnegie for the first time, or you may have heard of How to Win Friends, and this may be the time that you finally decide to go in and actually read the book. Now, just to give you a very brief history of Dale Carnegie, he was, back in the early years of the last century, he was a public speaking teacher, and the YMCA was his forum. He taught public speaking classes at the YMCA in New York, in Philadelphia, in Virginia, and in Boston. And his classes were so popular that he was approached by a publisher who asked him to write small handbooks, just offering tips. He did not have enough seats in his classroom for the number of people who wanted to partake of his lessons. And those small handbooks are the genesis, what was first published prior to his creating How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I have to share with you, I love this stuff. I love the whole realm of human relations, social skills, soft skills, emotional intelligence, interpersonal skills, power skills, people skills. I came into this business by way of the high-end hospitality industry. it was apparent to me that people needed social skills. It was clear that they needed to know how to make conversations. I was in a business where we created events for people. I would see people attend events and not be able to make conversation with more than just a handful of people. More than likely, they were their colleagues, people that they already worked with all of the time, or they were their immediate family members, or just those one or two people they already knew, but not crossing the room to meet other people. I noted that parents are more likely to send their children to a social skills class rather than to invest in themselves. And it's important to make sure that kids know how to handle social situations, but what about you? Are you too formal or are you too informal? There was a time where I was told that I was too formal, but if you decide to be a little less formal, have you become informal too quickly for the venue that you're in? There's a fine line. You're walking a tightrope wherever you are. Are you good at remembering names? And what do you do if you've forgotten a name while you're speaking to someone? Do you ask questions that have already been asked, thus demonstrating to everyone that you're not really tuned in? Have you sat through an entire meeting without contributing at all? By the time Business Class by the way, is the parent company for the Soft Power podcast, by the time it was founded a decade ago, I had personally witnessed and heard of far too many faux pas in professional situations. Unfortunate situations that were 100% avoidable. But they weren't avoided because whomever the perpetrator was, they didn't have the foresight to ask or to learn how to handle the situation in advance. As I mentioned a moment ago, we're more inclined to see the need for children to learn a skill than for ourselves or our employees or whomever we have influence over. By the way, I'll tell you, I'm not immune. In my first job out of college, I was working at a high-end hotel, and for months I worked with a gentleman. His last name was Fitzmaurice, and we were planning some big family event for him, a lifetime event. It could have been a significant birthday or an anniversary, something along those lines, but it was a large event and there was a significant cost attached to it. And I felt that I'd worked with him closely for months. I had done the absolute best that I knew how to do at that time with my background and the training, the excellent training I had been provided. However, on the day of this very important event for Mr. Fitzmaurice and his family, the marquee, or the board in the hotel where you enter and it states the names for each event that were taking place, the marquee stated Fitzmaurice, Fitzmorris. Mr. Fitzmaurice did not spell his name that way. It was Fitzmaurice. I simply had not thought to ask Mr. Fitzmaurice the spelling of his name. He was upset. His family was upset. And since that day, I have never forgotten to ask somebody for the spelling of their name. A person's name is important to us. It's important to everyone. At the very least, we should get it right, correct? Which brings us to principle 2 in How to Win Friends and Influence People, and today's topic, which is 6 ways to make people like you. We want people to like us. We actually need people to like us. It doesn't matter whether we're entrepreneurs or leading big teams in multinational companies, or a mom or dad looking for a sitter or a good play date situation. In order to make that happen, we need to be welcomed by somebody. In order to be welcomed, they have to like us. We must have gotten past that first impression. We talked about that in a recent episode. We have to allow people to look at us and say, they're a good person. I like how they think. I like how they express themselves. I feel good in their presence. My child, for that mom and dad looking for that good play date situation, my child will be well cared for with people like them. We will not get very far at all if people don't view us favorably. And in order for this to occur, we have to be aware of the basic principles of likability. So principle number 1 is to become genuinely interested in other people. Now, making conversation or small talk and how to make friends as an adult is a topic that comes up pretty much every day in my world. It's something that people struggle with. To make friends, just show interest in other people rather than trying to impress them with whatever interests you. It sounds so basic. However, what so many people are inclined to do is to try to brag or boast about something in their life that has nothing to do with the other person. People are interested in themselves, as Dale Carnegie says, morning, noon, and after dinner, pretty much all of the time. So showing interest in and concern for other people, particularly those who tend to be overlooked. Now, who would be overlooked? A gatekeeper. A gatekeeper would be, let's say, a receptionist, whether you are face-to-face in the vestibule of an office or on the phone. Housekeepers, custodians, security guards, cashiers. All of these interactions, you have a choice between letting that person know that you truly see them as an individual, as a person with needs, or to ignore them and just make that transaction. Once you acknowledge everyone in your presence, your popularity will increase. People will like you more, and you'll have unexpected benefits from that. And from that, also new opportunities, because that gatekeeper is more likely to tell that person that you're meeting with, that person who they're holding that gate for, that you were the most kind person that called or that came into the office or who applied for that job or arrived for an interview all day, all week. People remember significant interactions. So showing interest in customers can strengthen their loyalty to your company as well. It's all in the same family of interaction. So making friends takes effort, including doing things for other people, things that require time and energy and unselfishness and thoughtfulness. That's how you will make a connection to people that shows them that you truly care about them. So when you greet people, do it with animation and enthusiasm, just to set a positive tone for the conversation. Why hold back? Why not greet someone with great enthusiasm? Imagine how you feel when someone says your name with such an upbeat tone that it just raises you up for that moment. That's the power of words. It's the power of your presence. So kindness can have a profound, lifelong effect on people. Kindness and acknowledgement have become a pattern interrupt. It should just be natural because people see you coming, and because the last 1 or 10 or 50 people just passed by, they expect the same of you. So interrupt that pattern. That is always welcomed because I've never had anyone snap at me and say, "Don't say hi to me," and they're so caught off guard that sometimes they don't even acknowledge you. They weren't expecting it. But if you make that part of your brand, people will just see it in your persona. They'll see it in the bounce in your step. They'll see it in your posture. They'll see it in your eye contact. And they'll know that here comes a good person. But it's something that has to be practiced. It's not turned on and off. It just becomes a part of who you are. Principle number 2 is just smile. Every morning, I shouldn't say every morning, but very often, I come past a guy named Ed. He's just out on my route, my morning run, and he gives me the most enthusiastic greeting in the morning, and I love it. And I see so many people, but when I see Ed coming, I know that everything's going to be just kicked up a notch. We want to greet people with animation and just set a positive tone for conversations or positive tone for their day. People are glad to see you when you show you're glad to see them. Isn't that true? A sincere smile just warms a person's heart. Even in these politically charged times, a smile coupled with eye contact that shows a little crinkle in the outer corners of your eyes, especially if you're wearing a mask, can make two fierce opponents share just a brief moment of shared humanity. A smile also comes through in your voice, so smile when speaking on the phone and in virtual meetings if your camera's not turned on for whatever reason. We hear cheer in a person's voice. We know that we do. We know that we recognize whether one person seems to want to speak with us and another person doesn't, particularly if you receive feedback that your voice seems unenthusiastic, then that's a signal for you to pump it up, because if one person tells you, it's likely that another person feels the same way. You don't want that to be the one thing that separates you from the person who got what they wanted and the person who didn't. So smiling at people is a power move, because you're manipulating their behavior by causing them to smile. Now, of course, that's positive manipulation, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. It was just last week in episode 24 that we talked about the ripple effect of a smile, and it's a real thing. I'll share a secret with you now, and that's that I even smile at the most unfriendly looking people sometimes. I consider that action to be just one of my contributions to the world on any given day. I have no idea if they are in a bad mood. I have no idea if that's just their resting face looks unfriendly. But I know that if they are having a bad moment, as long as I know I can see that I'm not interrupting them in any way, it's just a greeting, which is what we should do when we're out and about, because we are human beings sharing this earth. If I can somehow affect their day or their moment, then I've done a part of my job. So make it a point to not only smile, but also to prompt someone else to give you one in return. Just give them out like little gifts. Smile because other people aren't doing it. And do it without caring what people think of you. That's the last thing you should be concerned with, because you never know who you've just given it out to, or if the receiver will just happen to mention to someone else that you were, once again, the friendliest person they came across all day, and you manage that without speaking a single word. How powerful is that? Principle 3 suggests that you remember that a person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language. How do you handle those occasions when you're caught off guard and you forget a person's name? Maybe you bump into them on a Saturday afternoon in a grocery store, and because it's out of context, because you're accustomed to seeing them in business, their name escapes you. What do? Well, the answer is you just ask them. You tell them that you've forgotten. When I can tell a person has forgotten my name, I help them out and remind them. I'm not insulted, not in the least. And I don't want the fact that they don't recall my name to impede on that conversation, for them to be focused on that in the back of their mind rather than whatever nice small talk or chit chat we're having. You want to recall people's names as well. Give them a reason to remember your name and to not forget it also. Now, how can you help someone to remember your name? Well, my name is Susan. I may say Susan, S-U-S-A-N. Some people hear my name as Suzanne, which is spelled differently. So I know I'm not offending a person when I say Susan, S-U-S-A-N. You may say Carla with a K, or Paul, like Paul Revere, or The Midnight Ride of. Now, those examples may sound silly, but you've immediately anchored your name visually in their mind. Remembering a person's name and a few details about their personal life lifts their spirits and the level of connection to you instantly. The level of importance you place on your own name is demonstrated when you're in a crowded space and the din from the numerous conversations taking place all around you makes it difficult to hear. But still, you do hear from clear across the room someone say your name. You heard nothing of that conversation but your name. They're not even referring to you in particular, but another person with the same name, but still your ears instantly were like antenna. Several years ago, employees went on strike against new ownership in the midst of a family feud for a supermarket empire in Massachusetts. What was the overwhelming response from the striking employees who supported one of the owners over his rival? It was that he knew their names. He knew details about their family, their births, their deaths that had occurred, ailments that they suffered. He remembered. So even in large, relatively impersonal corporations, knowing employees' names can make a difference worth billions of dollars and creating lasting loyalty for the sake of a name. Now, in the book, Carnegie shares the story of how Theodore Roosevelt had the uncanny gift for remembering everyone's name, from the campaign trail to every single person on his service staff. If Theodore Roosevelt and Arthur DeMoulas from the supermarket chain can learn and remember the names of thousands of people, I think that we can too. Start with the next person you meet by repeating the name right after it was said. Don't be embarrassed. Why are you embarrassed to restate a person's name? Is that not preferable to, at the end of the conversation, saying, now, your name was Tim, correct? If you stated it right away, if you interjected it into that conversation, you would have known that it's Tim. Don't be ashamed. Write it down if necessary. And as I just said, include it in the conversation before you part ways. Principle number 4 is to once again be a good listener. In conversation, what many people really want is an interested listener with whom they share their stories and experiences and opinions, and you'll do nothing. You'll do nothing but listen. Give your conversation partner the gift and courtesy of your attention. Use your body language to show that you're listening actively. For example, just face them and maintain eye contact. Allow your body language to show them that you're taking in whatever it is that they have to say. When you allow those communicating with you to have their full say without your interrupting once, they'll appreciate and respect you all the more. While it will be important to respond to particular things that were said, rather than thinking about what you'll say, just listen fully and wait for the appropriate time for you to respond. Sometimes you just need to vent or work through thoughts, and by verbalizing them to a willing listener, that just gives them that opportunity. And we've all been there at some point. Don't dislike them or speak of them in some disparaging way because they chose you to share what was on their mind. Because one day you will need that person to be an undivided listener as well. Principle number 5 is to talk in terms of the other person's interests. Carnegie relates another story of how Theodore Roosevelt would study that person's interest to connect with them in conversation. Because the way to a person's heart is to talk about the things that he or she treasures the most. Now, these days, we call that Google stalking. You know there's a big difference, huge difference, between mentioning a person's alma mater or a past company they worked at, where you may know a few people, and just verifiable and relevant commonalities that you share. There's a big difference between that and you're bringing up private information or anything about their children just because it was searchable online. That's only good if you want to quickly go from courteous to creepy. So begin by talking about what interests the other person just to break the ice and to establish a rapport. Then allow them to respond, and after that, a congenial game of verbal volleyball will ensue. There's no spiking the ball and no fouls, just a easy, relaxed game of give and take. Carnegie's 6th and final principle to get people to like you is make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. Being a people skills coach, I sometimes feel like a doctor in social situations. What happens is someone asks what I do, and I tell them, and they immediately have a scenario they want diagnosed, and for which they need a cure or an answer to how they should handle a social, etiquette, or interpersonal crisis. Early on in this business, it would drive me crazy, I'll be honest with you. Then I came to realize that most people, from college students and recent grads to executives attending conferences where I was invited to speak, didn't know the best course of action to take. They saw me as a person who could give them solid advice or just a sympathetic air. Over time, it became my pleasure to do both. There are also times when, through posturing, we can tell if admiration of a person or their prized possessions or the fact that they recently ran their first or their 20th marathon, whatever. It gives them great pride to be recognized. Some people crave that recognition. sometimes they rarely receive it. So let's just give it to them. Help them to feel that pride. It's our job to help other people feel good about themselves. Otherwise, we're just in our own heads. Because in business, particularly in competitive and high stakes situations, your acknowledgement versus another person not acknowledging can be the difference, that razor's edge between who gets the business and who doesn't. The golden rule is just to treat other people how we would like to be treated. We love to feel important, and so does everyone else. People will talk to us for hours if we allow them to talk about themselves. That's so true. Generally, people aren't asking question after question about you. They want something about you to relate to them so that they can continue talking about themselves. But still, we have to be conscious not to bulldoze conversations. So paraphrasing or interjecting conversations with polite phrases like, "I'm sorry to trouble you," or "Would you mind?" go a long way in conversation. Making people feel seen, heard, understood, and important is the key to good and positive interactions. If we can make people feel important in a sincere and appreciative way, then we will win all the friends we could ever dream of. To recap the 6 principles to make people like you are: become genuinely interested in other people, smile, remember that person's name is to that person the sweetest and most important sound in any language, be a good listener, talk in terms of other people's interest, and finally, make the other person feel important and do it sincerely. What are you going to do starting now? Like today, and the next interaction you have, to let your coworker or your spouse or partner or maybe your child, your neighbor or customer know that you see them and you appreciate them. Soft Power Society, I have a free Assertiveness Accelerator course for you. You can access it at businessclass.expert/power. This 5-day at your own pace course will help you speak directly and get what you rightfully worked for and deserve. Being skilled in assertiveness and how to say no confidently, politely, respectfully, and effectively is a key aspect of your powerful, polished persona. Just go to businessclass.expert/power for instant access. Thank you so much for joining me today. Bye for now.